can't suffocate guys. So he's just a
Here we are. I hope you like the new intro. Then something that Forino helped me with. Took a long time. You know, I just need an excuse to work on it. He provided the music, he provided the visuals. I just put in the words. That's really all I did. So everyone go to, you know what? We don't even have Forino's channel pulled up, but everyone go to Forino's channel. I'll pull it up real quick. I'll throw a link in the description. And why not in the chat as well? Because when I called, well, it's funny. Forino just likes, great, he's an artist. He's an Italian artist, and he just likes to make things. But, you know, I follow him, and I take a look at his work, and he provided, whoops, watching myself accidentally. So I took a look at this, and I said, could this be the new Jockle intro? And he was like, hey, man, here, I'll send it to you, and then we can fool around with it. And it was pretty good. It was a pretty good little quick project. Really only took like an hour or something. And so we'll save this now. We're currently having an earthquake, but that's fine. Nice job making it cheap. Yep, we made it cheap. So I think I've got him in the chat and also in the description now. So we'll take a look at a man who I have not seen in a long time, a man by the name of Attention All Humans From, and the link to his channel is in the description. Back in the day, I remember I made a video that was something like something about Ben Shapiro, going full Ben Shapiro mode. That was back in the day. And since then, I haven't really gotten any comments from this guy. So I didn't know he was still making videos. Didn't know what was going on with this guy. And then he commented recently and said something like, how is atheism a religion? So we'll start off just to answer the question. He asked me, he said, can you make a video? Can you explain to me how and why atheism is a religion? So I'll try to make it as short as possible. We did have a conversation about this in the comments, and I'm going to reiterate and try to explain exactly what I mean there. So it's important to understand Freud. I've never read Freud. I've never read Guénon. I've never read Machiavelli or Nietzsche or anyone. I don't read. I read Wikipedia. I don't read authors. I don't read books. But I reference him to give credit, because if I don't give credit for where the ideas come from, people think, oh, you're so smart, you came up with all this. No, I didn't come up with this. I read the quick notes. I read the summary, you know. But Freud did use these terms totem and taboo, or at least that's the English translation. I don't know what totem is in German. The German speakers should remind me. But totem and taboo, basically, a totem is like an idol. It's something that you worship. And a taboo is something you also worship, but negatively so. So a totem is something you're obsessed with. For instance, women's breasts is something that a lot of men are obsessed with. You could say that fecal matter is a taboo. It's something we're disgusted by. So what I would say is totem and taboo are the basis of religion. And all atheists have totems and they have taboos. Now, there are some atheists who actually understand that this is an inconsistency. They recognize that totem and taboo are basically the elemental, basic, fundamental building blocks of all religions. And so some atheists, they're upset about their hypocrisy. They recognize it and they try to fix it, but you can't fix it. You can't fix it, but sometimes they try. Sometimes they try to fix it, and they'll do things and say like, oh, well, you know, I hate sports because sports doesn't really matter. And then they'll say, well, I hate politics, just politics doesn't really matter. I don't worship politicians. I don't worship celebrities. I don't worship entertainment. And so the more strict and the less hypocritical of an atheist you are, the more and more you say, oh, I don't care about this. I don't care about that. And also negatively, right? As you have less totems, you also have less taboos. So you say, oh, porn, that's fine. Age of consent, throw that out the window. All this stuff, who cares? Who cares? Who cares? And so the logical conclusion of atheism is nihilism. And a lot of atheists will admit that and say, oh, that's awesome, that's good, that's wonderful. But what I say, therefore, is that atheism doesn't exist. I say atheism doesn't exist, and I'm using maybe an incorrect definition of existence there, but I'm using maybe a poetic definition of existence. To exist means to live, and to live means to struggle, and to struggle means to will. There's that philosopher Schopenhauer who talks about the will, and then Nietzsche after him refers to Schopenhauer and he says, no, it's the will to power. But in any case, it's this desire to worship, both the positive, the negative, the totem and the taboo. So there's a lot of semantic structures and dialectics that we could have here. Recently, I forget the guy. It's not Ziv Fuchs, is it? I don't think it was Ziv Fuchs. I always confuse the two of these guys. I always confuse because they're both post-liberal types. I'll look them up. I'll remember who this guy. I'll give him credit. But this guy was talking about the active and the passive, and how that's another dichotomy we could look at, where maybe the things you're active, you actively pursue, and then passive is the way that you run away. It's Ruben Gratz. I think Ziv Fuchs and Ruben Gratz, they're both like Germans or something. So all Germans look the same to me. So that's the basics of it. I mean, I don't think I can really get more simple than that, than just saying that the logical conclusion of atheism is nihilism. The logical conclusion of nihilism is non-existence. Therefore, atheists don't exist. To the extent that atheists exist, they exist as hypocrites because they worship food and they hate death. And to have love and to have hatred is the basis of religion. That's religious thinking, these value judgments. So, he makes arguments. I mean, I could go through for people who are interested, I could go through the comment chain and just explain it because we kind of went back and forth a little bit. Let's take a look at and see if we can, attention. I have to search that word. Attention all humans from. ATF? No, I don't think that's a good. Or AHF. AF. So he says, science is a religion. I ask him, what's your definition? He says, to believe and worship in a superhuman controlling power, especially personal God or gods. I say, do you see how government could be like God? Do you see how celebrities could be like God? And he says, my contention would be that believing in the existence of gravity is more reasonable than believing in the existence or moral righteousness of a deity. So I say, do you believe some religions are more reasonable than others? Okay. He says, yes. And I say, then what do you think about the idea that atheism is a more reasonable form of religion? He says, well, maybe the new atheist, there's a religious aspect, but if we're speaking literally, which is we're accepting the definitions in the terms of atheism, which are false. Atheism wouldn't necessarily describe how religious or non-religious one is. I'm sure that some people deify scientists, but I think using science to understand the universe is necessarily more reasonable than any religious way. This contradicts what I got him to earlier understand, which is that religion can be reasonable. There's not necessarily a contradiction between reason and religion, in the same way that if you hate poop, and someone throws poop at you and you dodge it, you don't say, you're acting very unreasonably. You just say, I don't like that, so I'm acting reasonably. Right? So reason actually doesn't have a context unless we have totem and taboo with which to apply our reason. If you don't have totem and taboo, then there's no purpose to reason. You're just, you're nihilistic, you're apathetic, you're depressed. I ask him if he's aware of Sigmund Freud. And I say that rationality and truth are gods which atheists worship. That is their totem. That is their idol. It's not bad. It's not bad to worship truth and rationality, but those are still gods and those are still totems. and their conception of those change in their particular, and they are anthropomorphized, in fact. He says, let's not generalize here. Can we agree that atheists don't worship anything? No, I disagree. Anyone who is living worships life. If you stop worshiping life, you die. I brought up Freud. I don't think you've considered totem and taboo. I think the lack of worship is a lack of life, lack of sex, a zombie life, not living, not important, dead, and a slave. Atheists don't exist because they are apathos. They are apathetic, not feeling. All right, so then that's when he says worship can have a positive effect. It's not a question of whether it's positive or negative. It's simply the fact that we all worship things. We worship our heroes. We worship mentors. We worship angels. We worship celebrities. We worship the government. I think Ryan Falk was honestly the one. Ryan Falk's an atheist, but he's the one who said to me that government is fundamentally religious. And then when I stopped being a libertarian, I was like, oh, if government's fundamentally religious, then we need religion to survive. You can't survive without religion. You can't exist without religion. So that is addressing the comments. We'll take a look at some of the interaction here. Why does Ken sexualize the chat? You know, I don't think I'm sexualizing the chat. I don't think anyone has beautiful breasts in the chat. Beware of radically anthropocentric worldviews, lest you be a snail whose world is but a leaf. Matters not if you define it as a religion. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Following your train of thought, I suppose I should have asked earlier, how do you define God? There are three qualities to God that I think, if we're to speak about God in the monotheistic sense. Now, polytheism allows for limitations on God, or gods, right? So the different gods have different powers, they interact with one another. So we're not talking about polytheism. If we're talking about monotheism, that's a specific totem, specific idea. And there are three parts of that. There's a trinity, in fact. The first part is eternity. God has to be forever. It can't be the case that God was not and then he was, or that he is and then he dies. That's not God. If God is mortal, or if God is created, if God is an effect of something else, if God is controlled by something else, if God is not above time, if he's in time, if he's affected by time, then he is not God. He must be eternal. He must be ageless, not just the oldest thing, but outside of age, outside of time, on top of time, controlling time. Next, we have perfection. He has to be perfect. He can't have any flaws. So there can be no exceptions of like, yeah, well, generally he's ageless, but this one time he tripped on a rock and then he entered into time, or something like that. So that would be the second part, is this perfection or completeness, harmony of God, completely whole. The monotheism, literally mono means the one. And if you look at Pythagoreanism and Platonism, the ancient Greeks, they believe that the number one represented unity and harmony, as opposed to the dyad, or two, which represents division, the Hegelian thesis antithesis, attacking each other. Of course, the synthesis with the Trinity brings it back to God. So God has to be perfect. The third part is God has to be infinite. That is, God has to be everywhere at all times. There can't be a corner of the universe where, oh, God doesn't exist over here. Or, well, God, normally he's all powerful, but if you go into hell, then he's not all powerful there, or something like that. God has to be these three qualities. So people can then say, well, what about the Christian Bible? Or what about Christian theology? Or what about this religion? Or what about that? But what about Judaism? What about Islam? Islam says that God has physical hands. How can he have physical hands if they're in one place and they're not in all places? This doesn't make sense. So you can go to various theologies and world religions which claim to be monotheistic, and you can point out the flaws and the contradictions or whatever. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm not defending any particular religion to you. I'm just stating I think these qualities are necessary to talk about a monotheistic God. Fourth density says, atheism as a Christian heresy that derives all its arguments from or against Christian concepts is uninspiring. God, never heard of her. Right. So that's basically the definition of God. And of course, people who write books about God, I believe in an evolutionary view of religion, that people's perception of God is basically, it is a synthesis, that we are humans, we're stuck in a human life, and we cannot be infinite, we cannot be perfect, we cannot be eternal. So the question is, how do we humans, who are radically separate from God, radically different from God, how can we possibly have a relationship with God? And the answer is through myth. The answer is through metaphor. The answer is through language. Language is always imperfect. Language is always, you can say, imagine in your head a chair, and you ask two different people to draw a picture of the chair they're imagining. They're almost certainly going to draw two different chairs. Language is not exact. Language is confusing. Language comes from an anthropomorphic perspective. Everything is biased by the way that we see the world rather than the way that the world is, objectively, if there is even such a thing. Obviously, our perspective is biased and flawed, and so as people attempt to describe God, what does God want? Who is God? How can we have a relationship with him? Is he masculine? Is he feminine? Is he both? Is he neither? As people try to understand God, obviously they're going to make mistakes. And so you look at Judaism. Judaism was a critique of polytheism. Judaism says, yes, we do need to worship, and we need to sacrifice, and we need to have laws. We need to have Hammurabi's Code. Jewish law is stolen from Hammurabi's Code. The concept of monotheism is derived from Zoroastrian dualism, as well as Egyptian cult of Akhenaten, the sun cult. So they're clearly, everything in Judaism is basically taking religions that existed as neighboring cultures around it, taking those, trying to bring them together, trying to formulate some kind of unified field theory of God to explain all these contradictions between the various religions, and then criticize those religions and said, we hate polytheism, we hate that. But Judaism could not have existed if it did not evolve out of what came before. The same for Christianity, and the same for Islam, and the same for atheism. Atheists could not exist and think the things that they think. We couldn't have science without these earlier developments. So, that is my perspective. I think we're going to start going through some of these videos, starting with Hope.
Hello there. It's been a long time. Did you miss me? I missed YouTube. I'll tell you that much. I missed all of, well, I guess I don't have any loyal followers, but, I missed the experience. I had a dream where I only have one child, but in the dream I had two. And they were just jumping around in the back seat. And in the dream, I was under the influence of narcotics, I think opiates, and I was doing some dangerous things, and I was a doctor. So, all around, very exciting stuff. Maybe it's because I have been watching a show called The Nick on Hulu, and I don't know, it's a good show, but I didn't think it would get into my dreams. Well, anyway, none of that is why I wanted to make this video. The reason that I prefaced the video with all that nonsense about my dream is just to give you a kind of a setting for,
It
where
is
this video
what it
is
is.
taking place.
You're going to get content
in my garage at
that
3:30 in the morning, or 3:48. So I was just thinking about the hopelessness of, right after I woke up, I was, thinking about that dream, and then I thought about the hopelessness of my economic situation, which I realized isn't quite as bad as I thought it was. But for most people, I think their place in the economy is not going to change very much, regardless of how much effort they put into it or how intelligent they are. There's some limiting factors. Whether or not they're just or whether or not they should be there, not really the point. The point is there are limiting factors that determine your economic status in life. And I was thinking, is there a way that I could change my economic status without, well, for one, without being a criminal, right? There's always the Al Capone route of getting money, the Wolf of Wall Street way, crime. It's profitable sometimes, right? As long as you don't get caught. But moral issues with that, so let's leave that alone. Sorry, I'm terribly congested here in the winter. But what other ways would there be? I can't inherit it because I just, I don't think my family's poor, but they're certainly not. They're not rolling in it, that's for sure. So just toss that option away. So if I'm not going to inherit wealth, and I'm not going to illegally generate it, and there's only a certain number of hours in the day, so, I could be a real hard worker. I could be loyal and trustworthy and, just continue to work overtime whenever I'm asked, even when I'm tired and I don't want to, and I'd like to just go home and sleep, but I'm gonna do what my boss tells me to do anyway, because then he'll make more money. And I will too, right? Just not as much as him, probably. So, if you're making $16 an hour, you will not be a millionaire if you just keep working the job, right? I mean, maybe you're in a weird situation where you can just save all of your money because you have no living expenses, but for most people, working this kind of hourly job, and even if it could turn into a career, a salary, it's the same thing. It's not really going to propel you to the next level. It's not going to push you up to a new tax bracket, or I mean, maybe it will, but even if you bump up 1 or 2 tax brackets, you're not going to be living a life of luxury. You're not going to be living the American dream as you're visualizing it. I mean, if you are, great. Maybe there are some success stories with just working the job, but it doesn't seem like a likely way for me to become as wealthy as I want to become. So forget those 3 options: the wage slavery one, the crime one, and the inheritance one. What else is there? There are ways of earning and acquiring money legally that are not based on your hourly wage. This could be, well, it would kind of just be starting your own business. And the initial investment, the initial time investment, resource investment, this is going to be kind of hard if you don't have resources either. If you don't have any land, you don't have, I rent an apartment. I am sitting in this little 1-stall garage with my 2006 car that's, going to start falling apart on me any minute here. But if it was more like intellectual property, maybe if you just designed some software, that would be a good way to go about it. How did Elon Musk do it? He helped found PayPal, I think, and then used that money to do other stuff. So you're not trapped. That's the moral of the story. There's hope. I kind of had this like vision of myself. I was just having a fantasy about talking to Tony Soprano. What would he do in this situation? And in my fantasy, what Tony Soprano told me to do is to stop thinking that you're so hopeless and start to look at practical options to achieve your goal. And that's good advice, even if it's not coming from Tony Soprano, right? Even if it is, it is what it is. You need to look at ways for making money that are not based on your hourly wage. Doesn't necessarily mean starting your own business, I guess, but I think that's the gist of it, is you have to work for yourself. So I guess that's it. That's all I really wanted to say. Why have I been gone from YouTube for so long? How long has it been? At least 6 months, I feel like, but my memory on that is maybe not the greatest right now. The reason is that I got a job, so I had less time in my day. And a while after that, my wife gave birth to our son, so he's a handful, let me tell you. It's not even worth explaining right now. Kids are trouble, aren't they? Well, even so. It's good to be a father, but it's just stressful, tiring at first, when you can't sleep for more than 2 hours at a time without hearing a crying baby. So, the moral of the story is, the moral of this video is, don't be completely hopeless. Even if you're at your current job, what you could do is look into profit sharing and develop a good relationship with the higher-ups so that you could just make more money. But again, it wouldn't be based necessarily on how many hours you're putting in, although that's certainly a factor. It would be more like, if you have a good idea, like, hey, we should get this contract from this person. Maybe they'll just listen to you and give you a slice of the pie when they get the pie. Or, what's another option? You could develop some technology with their funding, maybe? But it may not be an option to work within where you already have a job. It might be necessary. If you've got high goals, you may have to leave your company, which could be a method of success, but it's like a friend of mine once told me, the lone wolf goes far but dies hungry. So you can't completely isolate yourself in search of success. You just have to know when your company is holding you back or dragging you down, when what they should be doing is helping you just like you helped them, right? Ideally, that's how relationships should work, but they don't always. Well, I guess that's it for this video. Am I going to get to sleep another hour before work? Probably. I don't know if I'm going to keep making videos. I don't even know if I'm going to post this one. I probably will, but this is certainly going to take a low priority status in my life, this whole project that I was going to do. Because while I'm alive, I have to, I have some obligations to my family that I should fulfill. And because of my age, I don't think that I will die soon. So I'm obviously not worried about that right now. But eventually I think I'll get it done. Eventually I'll get bored enough that I'll make another video. So until then, live long and prosper.
I think it's interesting that he used to say, like Ben Shapiro, maybe he still does, but some criticisms of capitalism there, maybe some suggestions of worker co-ops, profit sharing, proletarian-owned companies and things like that. So interesting development.
So recently I've been watching some YouTube videos about Jung's concept of the shadow, because I think that perhaps a lot of the problems that I face and the suffering that I experience results from a, what would you call it, a denial of the shadow, or maybe a repression of the shadow, and possibly incorporating the shadow, so to speak, into one's personality could alleviate some of that suffering. So I think that's worth doing, possibly, but who knows? My frustrations and anger could be resulting from something else. So it's hard to say, but that's kind of what I've been thinking about. And having trouble doing that, though. It's, maybe it's not an overnight thing, but I'm guessing that there's more to it than just realizing, oh, I have an evil side, or I have a dark side, and I should just be aware of it all the time. I think that there's more work to be done than that if it's going to alleviate any of my suffering, at least. What else was I going to say about that? Yeah, and I think that distinguishing between the self and the shadow might not be correct. Like, for example, I was watching this analysis of the movie Joker, because the guy was using Jung to analyze the character of the Joker, Arthur Fleck, and he was saying, essentially, that his mistake was to think that he was his shadow, rather than just identifying impulses as the shadow and learning to deal with them better. But I don't think that for everyone this is necessarily going to be true. It may be that for some people, that's a whole other conversation of what is the self, but let's just assume for a minute that that's an easy thing to figure out, and that it's possible for the self to be identical to the shadow. Then some of these analyses won't really help. So, well, what do you do then? I think that changing oneself, well, maybe not easy, is possible. And if you think that the shadow is yourself, then I suppose you could still rest easy knowing that the self can be changed. And, well, I guess one place to start there would be changing one's habits. There you would find that behavior, at least, can be modified. Impulses and thoughts are more challenging for me, but maybe not for you, whoever you are watching this. And that's basically as far as I want to think about it right now. I guess what the other talking point of this here would be that anger and madness and violence that could result from those emotions is not always evil, necessarily. It's not always bad. But in this society, it often is. I think that sometimes it's justified, though. After all, a lot of the anger that I experience, it seems, results from perception of injustice. Maybe there's no injustice there. Maybe I'm not seeing that correctly, but assuming that there is injustice in my life, at least, then I think that it would be normal, psychologically, to respond to that with anger. But maybe not. Maybe that's not what most people's response is to it. What's more, if the injustice is affecting you directly, then I think it's very difficult to just brush it off and say, oh, well, I just have to accept the things that I can't control as they are and just move on with my life. There has to be a breaking point for everyone, eventually, I would guess. And I'm sure that's going to be a little bit different for everyone, but the point is that there will be some point for everyone. And this kind of goes back to the whole Joker analysis, as far as the character of the Joker, not necessarily Joaquin Phoenix in that movie, but what's the difference between you, a normal person, and another person who murdered his whole family? The difference is one bad day, essentially. And it's kind of oversimplifying it, but that's the Joker's opinion on the matter, and it is my opinion on the matter. Eventually, under enough pressure, after enough injustice, after enough victimization, any man will go mad. Especially if, well, I mean, sleep deprivation is a whole other conversation, I suppose, but that's a big part of it. I think, in general, you'd find that people who don't sleep are more, or I would say, people who sleep less than the recommended amount are going to have shorter tempers, in general, than the people who sleep more than the recommended amount, or the recommended amount. And that's where I'm at. I don't sleep enough, ever. And it seems that there's almost nothing reasonable that I can do about that. And that is very difficult for me. It's just a tough situation that I find myself in. And I have been in for over 5 months now. So, and I have snapped, but not, when I get angry, it's not violent, but it can be destructive. And after enough holes in drywall that I've made, I think that, people won't put up with that forever. I think other people become afraid when I become angry and let my shadow out, so I don't want to do that. But I find myself unable to control these impulses more and more as time goes on. And if sleeping isn't an option, and well, what do you do about that? You can't go anywhere because there's nowhere to go that'll let you in for free. You can't afford the places that will let you in to sleep. And it's a one-bedroom apartment, so you're just stuck in there, and no amount of earplugs or noise-canceling headphones is going to make that baby shut up. And any attempt to do so is not going to occur while I'm asleep. So I find myself stuck in this quagmire of of a downward spiral into madness. So, you know, I've heard it's temporary. Yeah, I guess, of course, it's temporary. But I guess the question is, am I going to stay sane long enough for that to pass and move on into a phase of fatherhood where I can be useful again? Because I'm definitely not right now. I didn't even go to work today because I tried to self-medicate last night and it didn't work, and I was sick in the morning. I mean, really sick. You know, it's not a good idea to use alcohol as a sleep aid, especially if you're using too much of it. And what else do you use? Melatonin? That doesn't do anything. Not anymore, anyway. And, of course, you know, I've heard, oh, just smoke weed. Well, yeah, but that's a hallucinogen, and so maybe I just don't know the secret to using it that way, but when I do that, it seems to keep my mind going rather than slow it down. And so I don't think that will work. And, you know, what other drugs are there? Seroquel, Trazodone, Ambien. These things might work, but, you know, then I don't think I'm going to be able to wake up on time, and I'll get fired and be even more useless as a man. So, you know, gotta keep going to work and making money, I guess. Otherwise, where are my wife and kid going to sleep when I can't pay the rent? And what are they going to eat? You know, it's not clear that they would have help without me. And I guess they would, but the point is that, well, I guess maybe that's not the point, but I would like to be able to provide for them, because otherwise I think I'll feel even more shame than I do now. So that's what I've been thinking about lately. And I'd like to note that I think it is possible to get through this and get better. When my kid was born, my wife didn't sleep for a week at all. And somehow she survived, even though I've heard that if you deprive a person of sleep for more than a week, they die. So, I mean, maybe she got catnapped, and I don't know, but it didn't seem like it. And so if she can do that, then, you know, maybe I'll make it, because I can sleep in increments of maybe 2 hours sometimes. And, you know, maybe I could just use my lunch breaks for that. But maybe not. I don't know. Even so, there's hope. There's, you know, even before all of this started happening, I was struggling with suicidal thoughts, and now I think, well, I still think about suicide a lot every day, but I think that even that is going to improve if I get the right treatment for it, which I think I'll get pretty soon. And, you know, there's a way out, but, you know, I've just been through enough stuff that I'm often surprised that I haven't gone off the rails yet and started murdering people. That's, you know, not a good thing to say, but that's how I look at my life sometimes in retrospect. So, yeah, I guess that concludes my thoughts for now.
I was going to recommend martial arts, but, you know, it's kind of hard to exercise when you're sleep deprived. But there is such a thing as a healthy exercise of violence. I'm not a violent personality. I've never put a hole in drywall. I have beat up a lot of trees. But, you know, I guess I don't have that issue. I think there's a kind of unexpressed masculine impulse that needs to be safely exercised. And one of the ways you do that is by expressing it in a healthy way, in a safe way, and the other way you do that is by trying to basically depress your masculinity. You know, get on a vegetarian diet or meditate, or, yeah, I mean, prayer definitely can help. But I haven't seen these videos before, so I'm not expecting what to find in them. Let's keep watching, though, because this one has my name in the title.
To Kenneth Brown's video about Harvey Weinstein. I didn't finish it because I have a short attention span, but I did listen to the part about jealousy and how narcissists can express jealousy in a negative way that can be destructive. I think that's what he was saying. So of course I thought of myself and how I have interacted with others over time. When I was, I think I was 14 years old, maybe 15, when I was looking on Wikipedia for answers to some of the questions that I had about myself. And I was just panicked for, you know, maybe a day or two, because I thought that I fit the profile for a psychopath. And this this sounds so stupid in retrospect, but this shocked me, and it was causing me some anxiety because, well, because I thought that I was a good person, and I think it's funny because it's obvious to me now that I'm not a psychopath or a sociopath, but at the time, I didn't like thinking about that possibility because it just seemed so counterintuitive to who I thought I was. And now that I think on it further, I have a lot of characteristics, a lot of traits in common with sociopaths, I'm sure, but that is for a reason that I maybe shouldn't even get into here. The point is that I'm not a sociopath. I am capable of empathy, and it just so happens that I am often narcissistic, self-centered. So I was thinking about that, and I think that this narcissism that I display often is, well, it has been harmful. It's been difficult for me to make friends over the years, I think, because of it. And, looking back on it now, I remember becoming friends with a guy when I was 15 and 16. And he was one of my best friends to date. And he was also definitely a narcissist, as far as you can tell, I suppose. I don't think it's fair to diagnose teenagers with personality disorders, but, it just kind of seemed like we were both headed in that direction, as far as, what kind of psychology defined us best. So we got along pretty well, but it was obvious to me later that the reason we both did not have many friends was because people probably just got tired of us talking about ourselves all the time instead of other things, or other people, or ideas, or what have you. And the jealousy point that Kenneth Brown makes is interesting, because while I haven't seen a lot of that, I guess, that seems, that does seem plausible. It seems like, oh yeah, that does make sense, that a narcissistic psychopath would behave that way, even on the internet, I guess. Yeah, so there you go. There are some thoughts. I like to think about psychology, but there becomes a point, even for me, where it's uncomfortable to think about it personally. First of all, because they say you're not supposed to diagnose yourself, whether it's psychological or not, because there's a bias there, I guess. So there's a problem with that in that sense, but also there's a problem with just a sort of fear that it causes me, as if I'm going to look into my own mind and find something that scares me. For example, I was listening to a Jordan Peterson video where he described something similar and was just using different phrasing, I guess. I think he said something along the lines of, oh, you might look into the mirror and run away screaming. And while I'm sure most people don't do that literally, that's a succinct way of saying what I am afraid of happening if I look too closely at myself. Because it's happened before. Not literally, but figuratively, I have had many startling moments of self-reflection. For example, realizing how powerful my shadow is and what have you. But the Jungian, the psychology and theories proposed by Jung maybe are not complex enough to describe what I think is happening to me. And, who cares? You can only think about these things so much before it just becomes masturbatory or asinine or what have you. There gets to be a point where, okay, self-reflection has benefits, but not if you do it too much. So, let's talk about other people and things. What's going on in the world? Well, as far as politics goes, I don't really care. I like Kenneth Brown's suggestion about just voting for Bloomberg, because we can at least change something that way. I don't really know anything about Bloomberg either, but, Kenneth seems pretty on point with his analyses in the past of things that I do understand. So I suppose I can trust him on that, assuming Bloomberg's still in the race. I haven't followed that very closely. And as far as Biden and Sanders go, they're just, it's just a dinosaur race, and I don't really care who wins, I guess. What else is going on? Oh, the coronavirus, yeah, we could talk about that. I guess there's finally a case in North Dakota. I didn't think it would get here so quickly, but I've heard that. What else? Yeah, so now maybe I will start wearing a mask. Who knows? I doubt that there's much I could do to prevent that, but, why not wear a mask? That seems pretty painless. So there's that. What else should I do about the coronavirus? Can I do anything about the coronavirus? I mean, not reasonably. I have a busy schedule. I've got my priorities pretty much set. So, besides, there are people with more horsepower between the ears that probably should work on that more than I should. I'm not a doctor, so, that is something where I can kind of throw up my hands and just say, oh, well, it's out of my control, it's, and that's really it. Although I may not have that opinion if I got the coronavirus or something horrible like that happened. Oh, geez, if my wife and kid got the coronavirus, that would be even worse. But whatever, they don't travel a lot, so I guess they'll be okay. What else? I don't want to talk about the coronavirus anymore. I've been hearing so much about it, and I just don't know what to believe anymore. Oh, it was the bat soup. That's what started it. Oh, no, it was an American that brought it to China. That's what started it. Well, I don't know where it started, and I guess I don't really care, because I don't see a lot of options that I have for changing that whole situation. So let's move on to something else. In this video diary, there's not much else to say, I guess. Still struggling to sleep, but it happens. I had a dream last night, so there's something going on. I'm getting something, even if it's only for 2 to 4 hours at a time. I might have slept for 4 hours. I don't know. I think maybe I woke up between that 4-hour window, but yeah. So I'm able to pull through and manage it. And it seems that the position that I have, my job, is still stable enough. And tomorrow I should be receiving a ketamine infusion after work, and I'm thinking that this will be helpful in a lot of ways. But I have realized that healthy natural sleep is more essential than I realized for the functions that I want to perform. So I will have to figure something out there. I'm probably just going to crash at my grandparents' place for a couple of nights and see what that does, because that would be easy, I think. And the only inconvenience of it is that they live about 50 minutes away from where I live. So the travel time sucks because there's a limited amount of things you can do while you're driving. But I can listen to YouTube videos. So maybe Kenneth Brown will have some interesting thoughts for me on the way there, if and when I decide to do that. And, I think that he once said that he described himself as being boring and bland and milquetoast or whatever the hell you want to say about Kenneth Brown, but I'll tell you what, he knows how to talk in a calm manner. He's not trying to attack you with stimulation to get your attention, and that is refreshing. That's a quality that I admire that I wish I had adopted before I started making YouTube videos, because I think it's just better for some of the things that I want to communicate. But then again, I was also trying to have fun in the process, and that doesn't seem to be Kenneth's main point with his videos. I think there's some underlying purpose as to why he's doing all of this, but I don't pretend to know what that is. But I like him. I'd like to see more of that kind of content on the internet, and I think if it became more popular, the world would be a little bit better. We all need to calm down, it seems. From my bird's eye view of the internet and how little I see it, maybe I'm not the greatest judge of this, but there seems to be an outrage culture that has happened, that has existed for some time, that I want no part of. But it's hard to not get sucked into that, when you read a headline that says something ridiculous and you just can't even believe it, but it's supposedly from a reputable source, so you read it anyway, and it's just like, oh, well, I got tricked, I'm getting scammed, they're stealing my time right now, god damn it, So it's nice to it's nice to listen to things from a calm, rational point of view, even if it's monotone. I don't care. And so that's what I've been thinking about lately. I suppose this video is getting about as long as it should get, so I suppose I'll end it here and then try to organize my thoughts some more before I make another video, because this is all impromptu. This is not planned very far ahead. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes in advance I think about doing this and then do it, but I don't think about what I'm going to do before I do it. I just flip on the camera function of my phone, hit record, and just start talking to myself, essentially. But I'm hoping that eventually someone will see it, understand it, and then write a comment or make a YouTube video in response to me that communicates something to the effect of, hey man, I get where you're coming from. I have similar experiences to you. We're friends now, and you're in a community. But even trying to do that is difficult for me because I am socially retarded. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about with people half the time. I may be smart enough to, build something or fix something or what have you. I have skills that require intelligence, but I know that when it comes to people, I am just a fool. I have no idea what I'm doing, and well, that's exaggerating a little bit, but I'm not well practiced with that. So maybe YouTube isn't the right place for me to start learning that either. But that's another thing about Kenneth Brown, see? That's, he offers little tips and tricks about social interaction that he just kind of peppers his videos with that, and I like that too, because I just kind of think, oh, well, I'm glad I heard that, so now I can think about this idea, and that might help me out with socializing. So, there you go. I'm drawing this out again, so time for an abrupt end.
Wow, that was a lot more compliments than I expected. I will watch the last video because I don't know what to say to all that.
So, after being given a ketamine infusion, many thoughts raced through my mind throughout the duration of that infusion. The main takeaway, however, was that committing suicide is the worst idea you could possibly have. Don't do it. Because life is all that there is. So that was good. I think it served its purpose. I had a few flashbacks during that experience to a time a few years ago when I was using large amounts of DXM, dextromethorphan, in either Delsum or Coricidin or whatever had it. And I guess the experience, you could say it's similar because they're both dissociative hallucinogens, but ketamine is better, I think, without a doubt. It's a very weird feeling. It's hard to describe to others, even though I will remember that and understand it forever. I guess there's not much else to say about it right now, other than that. I think it served its purpose, and I still need healthy, natural sleep. But at least I can go on more sure-footed, and I can know that it's all worth it. So I thought I would have a lot more to say about it, but it's just as simple as that. I think there's no need to elaborate on it anymore at this time, I suppose.
Well, I guess that's the happy ending to the 4 videos there. But something good came out of that. I don't know why YouTube has disabled the ability for people to go to channels, but yeah, the idea of wanting to you know, be part of a community, and feeling like you were stuck and like there's no options. You know, there's nothing around you. You know, you're sort of reaching out with both hands open, and you're asking for someone to reach their hands out back, or a whole group of people. You're asking to become part of something. And as you sort of reach your hands out in the world, or you have this emotion, you have this feeling, whether you're taking the action or not, but you have this feeling of extending your tentacles, extending your graspers, your feelers out there, and people just kind of brush by that. You know, you're sort of waiting there, you're kind of hoping that something's going to come and save you, that something's going to come along, someone, some person, some organization, some movement, some political movement, or who knows, that something will come, and then it will remove you from your condition. It's going to take you out of your isolation. It's going to put you somewhere different. It's going to give you some meaning. And it sounds like, from what he said, that ketamine, in a way, performed this function. You know, I'm not a big drug user, but it's hard to argue with results. I guess I'll continue to be myself and do what works for me. And of course, I can, advocate things to other people. I can tell them what I believe and how I act, and if they want to follow that. I mean, it sounds to me like prior to ketamine, he had experience with other drugs, and I don't know. Conceiving of yourself as being host to some great latent dark energy is a power fantasy. I agree with that, Menthol Gold. There is a serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer, who would watch Star Wars, and he would watch the scenes with the Emperor Palpatine, and he believed that he was like haunted or possessed by the spirit of the Dark Lord Emperor Palpatine, and he wanted to become Emperor Palpatine. So he would cut up bodies and arrange them and take pictures. And is it John Podesta or Tony Podesta? I think Tony Podesta is the one who has a golden statue hanging from his ceiling, which is based off a Jeffrey Dahmer photo, where it's a headless human, and they're sort of bent, backed, and arched. And I guess he could do that because of rigor mortis. When a person dies, their body stiffens up. It's no longer limp, it stiffens up. So you could put them in these weird positions and take photos of them. And then, Tony Podesta is a fan of that, I guess. So, he also, I remember reading that Jeffrey Dahmer liked to think of himself as like a Viking king, and he liked to conceive of himself as like being surrounded by skulls. So yeah, the idea of being possessed by some dark energy or dark force, it is I think fourth density referred to that as a self-fulfilling prophecy. The way you conceive of yourself is how you create yourself. If you conceive yourself as, I can't do anything and I can never change and I'm stuck with this and it's not me, it's this dark force that's controlling me. If people remember, I actually hosted on this channel a video of I forget which Florida school shooter, I forget which school he went to, but there was a school shooter who did an interview after the shooting with a detective. And the detective asked him questions. He said, "Why did you shoot these people?" And he said, "I don't know. The dark voice in my head told me. The voice told me to do it. And I believed that the voice had control over me and power over me." And he kept, I guess people can't watch that video anymore because it's not here. I mean, you can go watch. It's like a 13-hour interrogation. It's a pretty long video. And I trimmed it down as best I could. And, or maybe, yeah, Menthol Gold maybe is the one who said that. But, I mean, there might be legitimate cases of schizophrenia where people hear voices and they feel compelled to do things and they feel like the voice is going to kill them if they don't do these evil things. I mean, that's possible, and it's difficult for me to look at a person and really see what's inside their mind and try to help them. But I guess people have to do the only person, the person with the best vantage point sometimes, it's not me, it's going to be yourself. There are other cases where, especially with children, I think adults sometimes can understand a child's mind better, and sometimes you have infantile adults who don't know why they do the things they do, and sometimes there are cases where, like, a therapist or a wise man can understand why you do the things you do better than you understand it. But if you're a very introspective person and you're asking these questions like, am I a sociopath? Am I a narcissist? Am I an evil person? Can I change? You're asking these questions. I mean, I can come along and say, yes, you can change. No, you're not a sociopath. No, you're not a narcissist. I can try to convince you of that. But ultimately, you're never going to accept my affirmations unless you yourself believe them, unless you yourself choose to believe in yourself. And I've talked about before about, of course, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Christian because I have never limited myself to the doctrines of the Bible and viewed it as the Word of God and the absolute truth and whatever. So, but I still think that Christianity, I view it as a psychological technology. I view it as a therapy. There's actually a man who coined the term Christian therapy or Christian psychotherapy in response to Freud. Interesting guy. I forget his name at the moment, but I'm sure we could look him up here. Christian psychotherapy. Let's do a Google search on him. I think he's on Wikipedia. Well, we've got a bunch of. I'll just go straight to Wikipedia because we're getting a bunch of ads for Christian psychotherapy services. But I want to know who came up with the concept of Christian psychotherapy. Nude psychotherapy. Okay, this is not this is not good. All right, that is talking about a lot of Christian counseling. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to find this guy as easy as I thought it would. But anyway, there comes a point, I think, in people's lives where they say, I am inadequate, I am broken, I am flawed, I'm wrong, there's something wrong with me, and they identify with their flaws, they identify with their problems, and they say that I am my problems, I can't change my problems, there's nothing that I can do, I don't have power over myself, I am who I am, I can't change who I am. If I identify, let's say I call myself, I'm a bad person. It's impossible for a bad person to heal himself in the same way that if I break a pot, it's impossible for the pot to heal itself. It's impossible for, if, a person gets hit by a bus, it's not possible for that person to heal themselves, to operate on themselves, to do surgery on themselves. So the way that we think about objects in the world, the way we think about pain and harm, is that a person can't heal themselves. Now, technically, that's not true. When you get a cut, that cut heals, and you don't need some outside force to heal the cut. The cut just heals on its own. You heal yourself. So we do have the capacity to heal ourselves to an extent. But when we get into this mind frame where I'm a broken person, I can't heal myself, there's nothing I can do, at that point, there's two options. You can either stay the way you are, or you can, other than staying the way you are, you can view that there's some kind of outside force that can change you. That could be a social group. It could be a political movement. But it's got to be some power higher than yourself. This, Alcoholics Anonymous uses that phrase. But you have to believe that basically, if I can't change myself, there's got to be someone else who can change me. Well, what if your problems are infinite? What if it's an unmovable rock? What if it's just the worst thing ever? No matter how good the therapist or the doctor, no matter how good the drugs are, no one can ever fix this. Well, then you would need someone who is all-powerful, perfect, and could overcome anything, and that would be God. So there then becomes a problem of, why would God help me? I've sinned, I've done bad things. Why would God bother to help me? Why does he care about me? He cares about you because he loves you infinitely and perfectly and eternally, and there's nothing you could do. Because he's so strong, he's so powerful, there's nothing you could ever do to blemish his love. His love is perfect. His love is so powerful. It's an infinite sun. It's an infinite ray of blinding white light that envelops you. And no amount of darkness could ever wipe out that light. No amount of darkness could ever. So you're sort of, there's this sun, this great sun, and it has this blinding light, and if you would only turn your eyes to see it, then you would see the light. You would see it shining. You would see how brilliant it is. You would see how unending it is, and you would see how there's nothing you could do to ever hide that light, or to blemish that light, or to pervert that light. And it's so strong and it's so powerful that it has the ability to change even a person who has these impossible problems. Now, the cynic and the skeptic can say, like, oh, well, that's a good fairy tale that you have there. That's a good myth. That's a good fantasy. But it's not true. It's not true. Some people have problems that can't be fixed, If, you cut off someone's arm, they've lost an arm. You can give them a prosthetic. You can try to help, but you're never going to give them back their arm. If you kill a person, you can't bring him back to life. If you harm a person, if you abuse a person, you can never make them forget that abuse. So we can come up with cynical, realistic, pessimistic responses to this and say, like, well, this isn't true because I have empirical evidence that it's not true. This isn't true because, I did believe in it. I was a Christian, or I was religious, or I did believe in God, or I did ask God to save me. And it didn't work. It didn't happen. I think I was 5 years old when I asked God to perform the miracle of stacking plastic beads. I said, God, let me stack these plastic beads, and then it'll be a sign from you that you're real. Of course, the plastic beads kept falling down because I was stacking them on a rug, on a carpet. It was not an even service, so the beads kept falling down. I was like, all right, God, I'm not going to believe in you anymore. I was very spiteful. And so we can come at these problems with this realism and this pessimism and say, oh, materially speaking and statistically speaking and realistically speaking, God doesn't exist and my problems are big and this doesn't work, and there are plenty of Christians who have problems. Christianity is not a solution. Christians are just as much sinners. Christians get divorced and Christians commit murder and all of this, or religious people in general. If you don't want to pick on Christianity, you can choose any religion or any belief in God. You can say, you know what, there are plenty of people who believe in God, and it's all the same, and it doesn't change anything at all. And if you believe that, then it will be true. If you believe that God can't change your life, if you believe there's nothing that can change your life, then your belief will manifest as reality. If you have faith that there is someone or something outside of yourself that can change you, that can help you, and you persistently pursue that faith, and even if it's difficult and it's hard and it doesn't seem to work, if you're just faithful that there is this, and you pray or you meditate and you imagine and you visualize this ultimate power which wants you to confront the evil that you see in yourself. We all see evil in ourselves, and we can ignore it, we can embrace it, or we can confront it, we can fight it, and we can struggle with it. And if you choose the last option and you choose to confront, fight, and struggle with it, and you believe that that is what God wants, God doesn't want you to ignore your evils, and He doesn't want you to kill yourself, and He doesn't want you to give up, and He doesn't want you to become apathetic, and He doesn't want you to just lie in bed all day. He doesn't want you to just, and look, if drugs are helping you, that's great, but He doesn't obviously want people to just take drugs and get drunk and forget about their problems and pretend it doesn't matter. No, what God really wants and why we're here and why evil exists is because He wants us to confront evil. Because through the confrontation of evil, we recognize this greater purpose. We recognize that ultimately we can't confront this if we don't believe that this is what it's all about. Right? This endless struggle. You never stop fighting. You never stop struggling. It is eternal. It is infinite. There's something perfect about it. Or it's always pointing toward these things. It's always pointing toward perfection. We're always trying to perfect ourselves, but we never get perfect. We're always trying to get better, but we're never the best. So that struggle, that endless, eternal struggle, I think that's what it's about. I think that's what God is about. And no one's perfect in that. And a lot of people are atheists, and all these arguments are going to fall flat for them. And maybe they've heard them before. And, I mean, I didn't invent the concept of God. I just, I read the Bible. I read Rick Warren. I read C.S. Lewis. I'm trying to read the Quran now. So these are points that a number of other people have made. But it's ultimately your choice. It's your choice to believe in the righteousness of the struggle against evil, and it's also your choice to submit before evil and to say, oh, it just is what it is. I'll just accept it. I'll just ignore it. I won't confront it. That's a choice that people can make. So you can choose to believe or you can choose not to believe. And I believe that it does affect your life. I don't believe it's just like a salad dressing or a cherry, or I don't think it's superficial. And I feel that it has impacted me, and I think it's impacted a lot of people. Some people could, you can do statistical research and say, well, religious people aren't better off in XYZ. And actually, atheists are more moral people. I still believe that atheists, we've said atheism is religious. Atheists still believe in truth and justice and rationality. And I would say atheists do have their own gods. They have their own totems they worship. They just don't use the word God for truth. They say, oh, well, truth is not, that's not a God. That's not a human being. But I've never said God's a human being. Religion portrays God as a human being because we have to anthropomorphize when we're trying to explain these forces. If you ever take a chemistry class, sometimes you hear the professor say something like, well, the electron, he really wants to get close to that proton. Well, what do you mean he wants to? So first of all, you're saying he's a man, and he has a will, and he has a consciousness, and he knows where the proton is? You're anthropomorphizing. We can't help but do that. So I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's evil that people anthropomorphize God. But then when you take anthropomorphization, use that as a refutation for God, as I'm an atheist because I don't believe that truth is a man with a beard in the sky. Truth is an abstract concept. I don't worship truth. I just pursue truth. Well, then at this point, we're just talking about semantics and language. We're not actually talking about the heart of the issue. And people want to differentiate themselves as atheists because they've been duped into a high-low versus the middle strategy, which is if people are convinced that atheism is smart and religion is dumb, then they're going to be weak, because atheists are, you know, they're basically not just open. And when I was an atheist, I wanted to destroy all religion. I wanted to tear it down. I wanted to criticize it. I wanted to eliminate it. I wanted to ban it. So attacking religion is a way that you basically attack the middle class, because the aristocracy is always like free thinkers, Voltaire, Rudolph II. These people always have their crazy heterodox ideas, and the lower classes are also not very religious in a real sense. They're not, the moralistic people in society are the middle class. And so as part of a destruction of the middle class that we're seeing on a civilizational scale, there's the attack on religion. There's a lot of other reasons for the attack on religion as well. I would reference, of course, Gebser, the mental consciousness structure, as opposed to the mythic consciousness structure, how we're moving away from a mythic society, moving toward a more mentalistic, abstract, quantified society. So there's a lot of things to go into the why of why is this happening? Why is atheism so popular? I would also point to the ancient Greeks like Thales and Socrates, and the Greek rationalists who were atheistic. And I would point to the Charvaka school of Hindu philosophy, which was atheistic and materialistic. And so these ideas are very old. You don't need science to be an atheism. It's not the case that atheism leads to science, or I don't know, that science leads to atheism. Like, now that we have all this technology, now we understand that God is fake. People have been atheists thousands of years ago. So you don't require an iPhone to become an atheist. You don't require the Industrial Revolution to be an atheist. There were ancient atheists. So I view it as part of a civilizational cycle when people become nihilistic, when they no longer believe in totem and taboo, when they're going through a transition period, when they're losing themselves, when they're dying. That's when they say, well, it appears like there's no God to me. It appears like that because they're in a process of civilizational death, and that's where we're at right now. And it's happened before, and it'll happen again because things are cyclical. Let's get back to the comments. Is it possible to find the victimology video? I'm always hesitant to put old videos up because I don't know what they contain. But it might be possible that I could do something with that. If you, let's see, I might have to take a look at it, and maybe we could throw it up. What is the motive behind our mind loops is the question we should ask. Madness is an occupation like opium addiction. People pursue it because they want something to consume their time and attention totally. Yes, that is true. There's a movie called Leaves of Grass with Edward Norton where he explained that humans always strive toward perfection, even though perfection doesn't technically exist. This is unrelated, but concerning madness, there's a book called House of Leaves by Daniel Danielewski? I forget that, but House of Leaves is an interesting novel about madness. There are no exactly parallel lines. That perfection is what he defines as God. I like that, similar to your definition. Candizi, what are your thoughts on some key figures online whom helped popularize the Pomo right wing, who have now totally rejected those notions? Rejecting Ebert, Heidegger, Gebser. Well, I mean, I guess I don't reject Ebert, Heidegger, and Gebser. I mean, I don't think I've ever been on board with Heidegger and his anti-technology. There are things I disagree with Ebert on, and I haven't even read Gebser. I just know that he has a theory of consciousness structures that I think is useful. But I don't know. I mean, that person would have to, or those people would have to explain their beliefs and explain what do I think? What I think that can happen. People can change their minds, and if people want to make arguments, then I can try to listen to those arguments. Not only is my time limited, but my attention is limited, and my ability to pay attention is limited. So if you sent me a 10-hour video of paint drying, I probably wouldn't watch all 10 hours of it, just because I physically could do that. I physically could maintain in front of the screen and just watch the video and try to pay attention. It'd be a very meditative act, actually, just staring at paint on a wall. I mean, that's a form of meditation, right? But I don't do a lot of meditation. I don't do a lot of sitting and staring at the wall and trying to empty my mind and focus and pay attention. Physically, it's possible. Biologically, it's possible, but I don't do it. So, I haven't watched every John David Ebert video. I haven't read Heidegger. I haven't read Gebser. So it's not just a matter of time. Like, I have the time to read a lot more than I've read. Instead of making a video right now, I could be reading a book. So there probably are arguments out there, on somewhere like Peer Academy, where you could read about why Ebert and Heidegger and Gebser are wrong. If I really wanted to seek out those arguments and understand them, and I could probably do that, and maybe I could learn something. But I guess whenever I've encountered those arguments, they've been a bit too dense for me. In the same way people reference Deleuze, and they'll say, well, Deleuze thinks about the rhizomes and the body without organs. And it kind of just like goes in one ear and out the other. Like, I don't really grasp it. I'm not attracted to it. It doesn't stick to me. It doesn't have any staying power. Like, the words just sort of flit in front of my eyes. It's like they're there one moment, they're gone the next. It doesn't really have an impact on me. That doesn't mean that it's wrong. I could be wrong, and my critics could be correct. But it just means I feel like I haven't reached the point where I'm ready to understand, or ready to accept, or ready to engage with those arguments. And the process of getting to the point, because in the past, I didn't read the Bible. It took a lot of time and energy and effort and thinking and intention in order for me to get to be in the place in my life where I said, okay, I want to dedicate the time to do this. It was a matter of readiness. Now, if someone had forced me to read the Bible, I would have read it much earlier. If we had a school system in America that forced people to read certain texts, then we read those texts, But here on the internet, there's no force, there's no compulsion. This is all voluntary. And that's a problem, right? Because people don't always do what's best for them. If you just leave people to their own devices, they'll eat junk food and watch porn and play video games and do things that aren't very good for them. They're not going to exercise. They're not going to learn. They're not going to challenge themselves. They're not going to struggle. They're going to take the easy way out. So that's a huge problem, the fact that we live in an economy which is structured, in a society that's structured around freedom, because it leads people to do what they want to do rather than what they should do. It's about time preference. So if someone could force me to read those arguments, I would, but I just haven't. And maybe that's a flaw of mine. But there you go. What religion says God is a man with a beard in the sky? Well, that's the atheistic characterization of religion. So I'm going along with the atheistic characterization of religion. And again, the concept of I can't grasp Deleuze, I haven't even really tried to grasp Deleuze. And that's not a humble brag. That's not me saying like, oh, well, if I wanted to, I could. I don't know if I could. I have never tried. I've never sat down and tried to read like a full page of something written by Deleuze. I've never tried to read an essay about him. I think I read, was it Foucault or was it Deleuze who wrote about the societies of control? Postscript on societies of control. That might have been Deleuze, or it could be any of these philosophers. I don't remember, but I did listen to a podcast on that. But I just haven't put time and effort. I know there are people who are like, Deleuze is the greatest guy ever, and you have to understand Deleuze. I know that's like Joel's thing, but I don't. It hasn't attracted me. I haven't said, you know what, you're right. I do need to just take 5 minutes of my time and really dig in and focus on Deleuze. Because to me, it's more than 5 minutes. To me, there's a whole iceberg of thought that goes into finally like reading something. Like for me, I knew about Friedrich Nietzsche for years and years and years before I read like 5 pages of the Genealogy of Morals. I knew about Friedrich Nietzsche probably for 10 years before I read 5 pages of the Genealogy of Morals. So I feel like there's a huge iceberg with my thinking where it takes a lot of build up, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of people saying, "Hey, you need to read this," and I'm like, "Yeah, whatever, I'll do it later." So there's a lot of effort. What is the quote? 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. It's almost kind of the opposite for me. I feel like it's 99% inspiration, 1% perspiration. 99% of the world around me, my ecology pointing me in a direction and me refusing it and saying, no, 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 I don't want to do that. Look, I'm busy, I'm doing other things. There's something more important, or I don't feel like it, or I don't want to do it. Lazy, being undisciplined. And then finally, after 10 years, I'm like, okay, I'll read 5 pages. So 99% inspiration, 1% perspiration, 1% work coming out of that. You can symbolize the Old Testament depiction of God as being a man, but the New Testament literally says Jesus is a man with hair. I think with a beard, nothing wrong with that, with being imminent. Well, I mean, again, I'm not a Christian, so those theological problems, I'm not even going to bother to try to defend, or I can only say what I've said. I can't interpret the Bible for you. What's the correct interpretation of Trinitarian, Is it proper for a Christian to say this or that? I don't know. What is the correct? I mean, you'd have to ask a Christian, and Christians have as many opinions as there are sects, and there are as many sects as there are, I don't know, fish in the sea. And especially today with the, first the destruction of the Catholic Church, but now the schisms within Protestants and so on down the line. Now everyone has their own personal interpretation of the Bible, and they mix it with this and they mix it with that, and they say, I think that I'm a Christian fundamentalist who believes in a secular society. Like, what is that? So every day I feel like I encounter a new form of Christianity, which is part of its strength, that it's so adaptive, that it's so adaptable, that it's so mutational, meaning that it can adapt to any new environment and still survive. A religion that's dogmatic and always stays the same, that's a religion that's fragile, that can die very easily. But I think for that reason, we'll see Christianity survive in one form or another. People have said that liberalism is a form of Christianity. I think there's legitimacy to that. At least it evolved out of Christianity in the same way that Christianity evolved out of Judaism. You could say Christianity added the New Testament, and liberalism added, science and natural rights and individualism and things like that. Ivan the Heathen's video was very good. I almost want to rewatch that, and I almost never rewatch any videos. But we've been going for an hour, and we're trying to keep it short. So thanks for joining. A lot of difficult problems were brought up that I can't solve. And I didn't watch any of those videos before I did this stream. It was just sort of a surprise because, why not? Why bother preparing? Why not just jump into it? So I said I talked a whole lot about the problems, but ultimately talking about them is not going to solve them. It's an unfortunate position that we're separated by the internet. I mean, the internet's, I guess there's something fortunate about the fact that maybe talking about it is better than not talking about it. If you have the option between don't do anything, don't talk about anything, versus don't do anything and also, but you can talk about it, maybe that's more helpful. But it is unfortunate that, I think that it would be a lot more effective if people could talk in real life. There are ways to contact me if people want to do that. I do have a Discord, and I do have a Twitter account. If people have those sort of accounts on those websites, they want to create them, you can contact me. You can talk to me one-on-one. You can talk to me with a voice chat or a video chat. And maybe that would be more helpful. But ultimately, the most helpful of all would be to be able to talk to people in real life. So it appears I've converted Mr. Attention into a deist, which I think is progress. I think that's progress. That's enough for the night. Not as satisfying as I wish it was, but that's the state we're in, and that's what we have to deal with. There's no big scary dragon for us to enter into a bodily competition. There's not a bunch of, it's not like a vigilante film where there's gangsters and you got to go get in a physical fight. That would be exciting. It would be exciting if your problems in life were limited to, I need to fight a physical fight. In some ways that would be simpler, but we can't do that. We don't have that option anymore. We have to deal with these spiritual problems, psychological problems, social problems that are more enervating, that are less they're less exciting in a way. They're more depressing. Being in a physical fight is not depressing at all. I mean, even if you get beat up, I guess if you're kind of crippled afterward, that's depressing. But being in the midst of a physical fight is very exciting, even if you're losing. Whereas being in a fight with these forces of atheism and apathy and self-doubt and all these psychological things, these are, I think, much less exciting and much less enjoyable because of evolutionary history reasons and the whole things I could go into later. But I'm gonna thumbs down my own video. How about that? Not that I regret making this video necessarily, but just like I'm dissatisfied with the conclusion, and I usually leave on a bit happier note. But we'll just have to be unsatisfied, and we'll have to keep working. Until next time, I'll probably do some streaming on DLive. I'll probably do some chess and Minecraft on DLive. If people want to go over there, link in the description. Bye-bye.